So I think one thing that helps with that is really understanding, how do you get better at that? What are the rules of this game? How can I, get some traction in this? That gives people hope, right? Because they feel like, oh, there are things that I can do. Interviews in 2 days. It can be really hard to shift things internally, right? And intrinsically feel better about yourself. That really takes time. But what you can do is look for external validation. So looking at your past career wins.
All right, welcome to this episode of the How to Get a Job podcast. Today I have a really good episode, and this episode, it's actually one that's relevant to every type of job seeker, whether you're coming right out of college and it's your first job, or you've been in your career for 20 years and you're trying to pivot. And it really is about the mindset of job searching. Look, like anything, any big goal that you have in your life, whether it's a career goal, a health goal, or an entrepreneurship goal, career coaching, getting a job and job searching, it's a roller coaster, and you're going to go through the ups and downs. It's going to be a lot of mental challenges, and knowing how to have your mindset ready, how to control those ups and downs of the job search is going to be really, really important. It's actually going to help you get a better and faster job. And to talk about this topic and talk about the I guess the mindset that's required to get a really good job, I have an amazing guest. I have Jessica Sweet, and Jessica is not only a career coach, but she's also a therapist, and she's the owner of Wishwell Coaching. So, Jessica, welcome. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me.
No, thank you so much for being here. I would love to hear a little bit more about your story and how you were combining therapy and then career coaching all into one.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, I find that, like you said, there's so much mindset stuff that happens related to job search, related to your career in general. It's really hard to separate out who you are, how you think, um, anything like that from your career and your job search. It's just, it feels impossible to me to be able to kind of separate those things. The job search itself, like you said, is a roller coaster. And so there's a lot of challenges there. But the rest of your career as well really can have some landmines that you really need to watch out for.
Yeah, I've been coaching and mentoring job seekers for over 10 years now. And that is probably the one thing that I didn't realize that plays such an important role in career coaching. Then it's helping them with their mindset, right? And um, I'm not a therapist, right? Like, you're a therapist, right? I'm not a therapist. And that's something I have to say to them multiple times. It's something I actually have to add to the agreement, because, like, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a financial advisor, I'm not a marriage counselor, like all these things, but it is something that's really important, because I see it time and time again of how much your confidence is affected by the constant rejection or the ghosting, or the hopes that you're like get the call, you get the interview, and you think this is going to turn out, and then you then stop everything, stop networking, start applying, and then later find out that they didn't move forward with you because they moved on with another candidate, and you feel like you now have to start all over. And I think that's like a lot part of it, why the job search process can take more than 3 months, 6 months, 9 months. And so, what have you seen? What commonalities have you seen, and what advice do you have to get started on changing that mindset and preparing yourself for the job search process?
Yeah, I think it's really important to recognize that a lot of it really isn't personal. So it feels very personal when you get a no. And, even when you, like, let's say you upload your resume for a job that you feel like you're going to be perfect for. And, like, before you could even step away from your desk, you get a rejection email, right? That can be like, what the heck is going on with me? What's wrong with me? What's wrong with my resume? What's wrong with my career? That, like, people don't see my value. So I think just understanding that there's a lot of it that has nothing to do with how good of a candidate you are first, and you as a person second. It really is about perfecting some of the job search skills that are out there, like your resume, like networking, like positioning yourself well, or applying to jobs that make sense for you to apply to. Um, so I would say that's the very first thing, is just try to depersonalize it.
I love that advice because I think you're right. Like, I think job seekers just take it so personal, like if they're attacking the individual. And even as I think back as my time as in my corporate career, as I was, as a hiring manager, as somebody who was involved in campus recruitment, I would even say like over 99% of rejections weren't because of the candidate. It wasn't because the candidate was not good or not qualified. It was more of this person was just a little bit more qualified, or if the or maybe the changes, or we had an internal candidate, or even before the even though we posted a job, we had already had an internal candidate or a referral, but because of the company policies, we had to post a job for 2 weeks, and all those people that apply were really didn't have a really kind of fair shot in a sense because we already had identified it. There's like the back end parts that a candidate doesn't see, but yeah, you're right. We take it personal. We take it like, okay, I'm not good enough.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like you said, the job might not actually be a real opening, or you know, people are looking for something very specific when they're hiring, and they may get a lot of candidates that are very similar in qualifications and skills, but in a case, even when you're being considered or you're being interviewed, it's just like you really need to think about the fact that there's going to be other people there that might be a better fit, not even necessarily because they're better qualified, but just because they're a better fit, maybe in terms of the culture or something like that. So yeah.
So how do you, and I know that it can be different and more of one about generally speaking, right? If let's say that I'm a client of yours, I'm a job seeker, and I go to you and I go, hey, Jessica, look, like honestly, I'm feeling extremely anxious and feeling depressed. I've applied to 100 companies. All I do is keep getting rejected. Like I don't even feel like applying anymore. Like how do I overcome that? Like that, those really down feelings that you job seekers can have, and a lot of them have more commonly than not. Like if you're listening to this, like the percentage of clients that come to me and have with help more on like, hey, I feel so down, it's like 80% of them feel this way. So like I think like people feel like they're the exception of this. But what advice would you have about helping myself pick myself up, and how should I be looking at this?
Yeah. So a couple things I'd say there. One thing that I cited in an article that I wrote, and I can't remember off the top of my head where this was, but um, it was a study that talked about why job search is so hard. And one of the things that it said that really, really stuck with me is that it is so hard because it's amorphous. So like we don't know what we're supposed to be doing necessarily. And then you don't get feedback. So it's like constantly you're shooting in the dark, you're not getting anywhere, and you don't know how to improve that. And it's not like you can just be like, well, heck with this, like this is stupid. I give up. You can't do that. You have to continue because you need a job. So it's like you're playing a game that feels pointless and you don't know how to get better at it. So I think one thing that helps with that is really understanding, how do you get better at that? What are the rules of this game? How can I, get some traction in this? That gives people hope, right? Because they feel like, oh, there are things that I can do, there are things I can improve, and there's a way to get ahead and actually win this game, and not just constantly be playing it. The other thing is self-care. Not job searching alone, taking care of yourself and doing things that are not job search, not putting so much pressure on yourself, like I have to be job searching 24/7. Like just really taking care of yourself and understanding it's a process, I think can also help.
Yeah, I love that advice. And one thing that really stood out that you just said is like not job searching alone. I work with a lot of international students, right? And so like when I think about their situation, it's extremely difficult because not only is it harder for them to get a job because they have a limited amount of time. There's like less than 40% of companies that are hiring actually are willing to sponsor for their particular work visa. They're a lot of times alone in this country, right? They're coming here from a different country, from a different continent. Their families all across in the other side of the world, and they don't have family or even a lot of friends, a lot of the friends they have is other international students that they've met. And if you think about a lot of the students that I work with are from India in particularly, and their families have to get massive amount of loans to send their kids to school here because it's extremely expensive, the exchange rate. And so they're afraid to tell their parents how difficult it is for them to get a job because they're afraid culturally, because of the culture, of letting their parents down, because their parents just pretty much mortgaged their home for this bet of their kids coming to America, getting an American education, for them to be able to stay in America, get a really good paying job, to be able to pay off that loan with that job. And if they're struggling to get the job, that anxiety is so much, and then that they're feeling the weight and pressure of the world, and yet they have no outlet because they can't go to the mom, they can't go to the dad. And so I think that, to your point, having a community, whether that is your friends that are in school, or joining a program where there's a community aspect of it where you can talk to people about it instead of just bottling it all in, it's super important.
Yeah, yeah, it really is. And the the challenges you describe are different, for your folks than they are for the folks that I generally work with. But there's still like that idea, like there's the weight of the world on them. It's really, really present for job seekers, the vast majority of them.
But I would even say, like, I know that you work with more like mid-career professionals. If I am like, if I have a wife and she's a stay at home with the kids and I'm looking to make a career pivot, maybe I feel stuck, right? I still feel that pressure because now it's not only my career, and it's, I actually now am responsible for this three other people. I have all the bills, the mortgage, and I also probably, like, to be honest, I don't know that, like, I would probably talk to my wife about some of those stuff, but I also probably won't be 100% transparent on how I feel because I don't want her to freak out. I don't want her to stress out. And so then that probably adds more stress on the individual itself. And because it could also be flipped, right? But um, I think that's why it's really important. I think that's where I actually see there's so much value in working with a career coach or a community, or getting help of not doing this alone.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I work with people who are job searching in group, in a group program that I have that not only guides them through the nuts and bolts of here's how you do it, but also provides that community and also the support around the emotional side and mindset side. So yeah, I think it's hugely important.
How do you suggest someone that maybe has been feeling this way gets called to the interview? The interview is 2 days away, but still kind of feels down upon themselves because, like, how do you help them? How would you suggest them changing that mindset? Because if they go like this to the interview, if they don't believe in themselves, why would the company believe in them?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So one of the things to look at, if it's a quick turnaround like that, right? Interviews in 2 days, it can be really hard to shift things internally, right? And intrinsically feel better about yourself. That really takes time. But what you can do is look for external validation. So looking at your past career wins, and I always recommend keeping a log of that, like a brag file. Looking at maybe people who have recommended you on LinkedIn, looking at what past coworkers have said. Like, look at some of your wins and recognize where people have validated you, where you have accomplished something, and try to go in to the organization, and ideally, like, you've got a way that in your narrative and in your interview prep, that you've connected the stuff that you've done to the stuff that you would be doing in this next job, whether it's the same thing or it's a pivot, or whether it's a step up. Like, you've got a way to say, like, all these career wins that I've just looked at now are relevant for this conversation I'm about to have. And that, I think, really connecting those things and really clarifying that through your branding is very helpful.
I love that. I love that advice because you're right. Like, I think the best way, at least even for me, like, the best way I found to get myself out of those funks is by the facts that I've been able to succeed in other areas. And so there's no differ. Like, I'm going to succeed in this if I continue working on it. And it applies to the job seeker. And I even think about, like, I obviously can relate more to my clients, and this is why I'm sharing those examples. It's like you got accepted to this university. How many people didn't, right? Like, so like you obviously are winning here. Like, what's your GPA? What percentage of people have that GPA? Like, you got this internship. How many people apply for that internship didn't get it? So like you start looking at all the things, or even too, like when this is an advice that my best friend gave me, like when I was starting my business, for the first 3 years of it was really bad. Like my wife calls I call it the dark ages, because I dealt with so much anxiety and depression and just the challenges. There's so many similarities between the job search and starting a business, like the ups and downs of it. But um, I remember my best friend saying like, hey man, you should be proud of everything you've accomplished. Like, next time you feel those highs, record yourself. And that way, whenever you're feeling down, you can go watch yourself talking to your future self that's down. And I found that to be really helpful. Like I have notes on my phone, like on the note part of the iPhone, where I'm like recording how I feel, kind of like journaling or diarying, being able to go back to those pages of when I felt really good.
Yeah, I love that so much. That's really awesome. And it's the same idea of like a brag file, except it's like in real time, here's what I did that was great. And you're recording it, like voice recording it. So you can actually go back and listen instead of just reading it. You can hear your own self and like that energy. You can kind of capture that in a different way. So I love that. The other thing that you said there was like, how many people haven't accomplished whatever, that it is. And I think over time, it's really helpful for us to think about like, what are our goals? Like, what do we want to accomplish? And then, instead of comparing ourselves to other people, because that can be a losing game at times, right? Like, oh, I didn't do this, right? Like, there's so many people who are making X amount of dollars, and I'm not making that. So just like setting yourself goals and measuring you against you versus you against other people, I think can be really, really helpful to get out of that loop of like, oh, I'm not good enough. Look at all these other people who are winning on social media.
Yeah, you're right. And you added social media there, because I think if all you're doing is comparing yourself to the people that are on LinkedIn that put that never post, but the only post they post is, I'm happy to announce that I got this job. And it seems like the whole world but you got a job. I think it's important to actually realize that you're comparing yourselves to someone else's highlight reel.
Exactly. Yep. Yep. It's so true.
So on the flip side, on the positive side of this, why do you think that, I think before I hit record, I was telling you this, I've noticed this, and this is really common. I don't know if you've noticed this, but once we have someone that gets a job offer and they're still in the interview process with other companies, they'll go get multiple job offers at once. So like, haven't got an offer for months, and then once they do get one, within a week, they'll get multiple. Why do you think that is?
Yeah. I think there's a couple reasons. So I have definitely noticed that. And I think the biggest reason is it just, you go into that interview with a totally different energy. Like at this point, you have nothing to lose. It's like you've got a baseline, you've got a job, right? And it can only get better from there. You can only get a better job, right? And so instead of like in your mind thinking, this is the difference between me making my mortgage payment or my rent payment and not, you're thinking, this is the difference between me working at X company and Y company. And that feels so much better and gives you so much more confidence. And you can kind of go into that second interview with the attitude like, yeah, somebody wants me. And what are you going to do to get me? Right. And I feel like that should be like you shouldn't be arrogant, but you should have faith and belief in your own ability to contribute and the idea that somebody really should want you. And I think a little bit more of that energy in first interviews, like before you get that offer, I think that would be really helpful to most people.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that's, as now, like as a someone that owns a company and I have over 20 employees right now, over 20 full time employees working. I actually like want to hire someone that is confident, and there's a fine line between confidence and cockiness, but that interviews me back, right? Like that, like that's taking their career so seriously that they want to ask me questions about the job or the growth potential or where is the company going and things like that. They're interviewing me back because it is an equal exchange of value. Like, sure, I'm going to pay them a salary, but they're spending 40 hours a week of their life here. So um, and so I do think that once you have an offer, you feel like you have the leverage to then be able to ask more questions and interview them more, where you should, like to your point, be doing that the whole time, because it is like it has to be a two-way interview. Now, like they'll ask you maybe more questions than you would, but like you should not be afraid to be confident to that because they need you just as much, if not more, than you need them.
Yeah, yeah, and I love that you look for that in the people that you're interviewing and hiring, and I think that's really so true. Like you are spending 40 hours a week there or more, but in addition to that, there's like opportunity costs. Like, what else could you be doing if you're going to take this job and it turns out to be terrible because you didn't ask those questions? Like, what opportunity did you miss out on? And then the other piece is like there's a lot of identity stuff wrapped up in that. Like, you're working for a company. That brand in some ways becomes your kind of brand, at least mentally. And the work that you do is like you're thinking about it, you're creating, like all this energy goes into it and it becomes part of who you are. And if that turns out to be bad because you didn't go in confident and ask good questions, like again, it's another loss. It's not just the 40 hours. So yeah, totally agree.
Awesome. Jessica, before we wrap it up, we'd love to hear a little bit more about what you do, how you work with clients, which type of clients do you work with, and if anybody here that's listening to wants to learn more and connect with you, what would be the best way to do so?
Yeah, great. So I generally work with people who are leaders in their organization. So people in midlife who've had time to like grow into their careers. And generally I'm working with people who are people, problem solvers, and are looking for, some way to make meaning in their lives or impact. It doesn't have to be, and in fact, it usually isn't nonprofit, but it's like, I want to contribute to something that's more than just making widgets. I want to like do something good in the world and feel good about the work I'm doing. Those are the folks I work with. They generally tend to be more creative types, but in lots of different fields. And if folks want to get in touch with me, my website is wishingwellcoach.com. And you can check me out on LinkedIn. I think my handle there is Jessica Sweet Coach. So you can check me out there.
Awesome. Jessica, you're awesome. I will put a link to your website and your LinkedIn on the show notes. So if you're listening, it's simple. Just hit the show notes. You can get access to Jessica's website and her LinkedIn rather easy. Jessica, thank you so much for being here. And for all of you listening, look, you probably either yourself or know someone that has gone through the ups and downs of the job search process, and this episode could be very helpful for. So all I ask, we don't run ads right now in this podcast, is that you share this episode to someone who's going through the job search process, who maybe has come to you and vented you about how stressful this process is. So maybe this episode can help them. If you enjoyed this and you have not hit subscribe, please hit subscribe and leave us a review. Thank you all so much for listening, and catch you guys on the next episode. Bye.